most of us think we have a problem in our life unless we have something that's a bigger problem to contrast it with. And when you see this story and you walk through their exact life experience of the course of these 2 years, the year that we work with them is 30 days, but you see the course of what's happened to them by finding out what's happened a year later, you begin to understand that it doesn't matter what happens in your life, you are more than any moment. There's no challenge you can't face and overcome. The events of our lives don't control our lives, our decisions do. And so I figured if we could take a couple that has faced this big a challenge and be able to break through, then you could look whatever's in your life and make it happen. It's kind of like, if I wanted to show you that if you could face your biggest fear, your smaller fears kind of drop aside. It's like, what's your biggest fear? Today, one of the biggest fears so many people in North America and around the world, and the Western world, are facing is losing their job. It's a horrific possibility. It has impact on your family, your psychology, your emotion, so many things, your choices. But the truth of the matter is, what's a problem? Losing your job is a massive problem until you find yourself in a position where you lose all your savings. What it took you maybe 10 years of working to get. Then what's a problem after losing your savings? That's not a problem anymore when all of a sudden you lose your leg or an arm or something horrific happens to one of your children. That's not a problem when someone tells you all of a sudden that you have terminal cancer. And I've had those moments where somebody says you've got that tumor in your brain and we don't know what it means. Those moments take your other problems and make them disappear. And you know what's interesting? When you ask most people in North America, what's the greatest thing that could ever happen to you? Give them 10 seconds. It's been done over and over again. First 10 seconds, what comes to your mind? What's the best thing that could ever happen in your life? The majority of people in North America say what? Can you guess? Winning the lottery. And many of them say winning a $100 million lottery, $200 million lottery. That's what's going to make their quality of life extraordinary. But when you do the studies, and there have been many done over the last 15 or 20 years on people that win these giant lotteries, what are their lives like 2 years later, 3 years later, 5 years later? Is the quality of their life extraordinary? Rarely, if ever. Because what's happened is they haven't grown. Life gives us these events, these, quote, horrific events, because there's an area of our life that has to grow. If you were to ask me, Tony, out of all the millions of people you've worked with, if someone really wants to feel alive, they want joy, they want happiness, they don't just want money or things or just even respect. They want to feel a sense that life is meaningful and alive. What does it take? I tell you one word: progress. When you're making progress in your life, it doesn't matter where it is, you're going to feel more alive. If you're overweight, but you get yourself today and you say, you know what, I'm stepping into gear. I'm just putting these darn shoes on. I'm not waiting for the perfect, person to come by and coach me. I'll get that too. But right now, I'm just going for a walk, or I'm going to go for a jog, or I'm going to go lift some weights. I'm going to do something right now. And you get yourself into gear and you do that for a few days in a row, even if you haven't lost the 10, 20, or 30 pounds yet, you're going to start feeling better immediately because you have the power of momentum and you're making progress. Progress equals growth. Growth equals feeling alive. We grow or we die.
Let me tell you this real story. This just happened. I spoke at HubSpot last week. Okay, 13,000 people in this Boston Convention Center. It's like 10 minutes before I go on. And I look at Twitter and this person sends this tweet out that says, why is Brene at HubSpot? Why is @Brene Brown at HubSpot 2015? And he had just tweeted like, love Seth Godin, love Amy Schumer, all these people, but why is Brene Brown? And I'm like, oh my God. Why am I at HubSpot? What am I doing here? And then I'm like, I start sweating, and it's like, and it's a convention center. It's like, ladies, I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? And I'm the opening keynote, and I'm like, and then he tweets it again, and I'm like, oh my God. And so I'm like, these are marketing people. I don't know anything. So I start Googling on my phone, marketing terms 2015. And wait, the first term that comes up is incentivize. I'm like, I've got to work the word incentivize into this keynote. I'm like, what does that mean exactly? I don't know, but I'm going to say, we're going to incentivize. I'm like, what is happening? And I have a total crisis of confidence. Like, because shame drives 2 tapes, not good enough and who do you think you are? And I'm like, who am I? Right, snaps, terrible. And so then all of a sudden, I'm like, who is it? Because what happens when you get backed into a corner? My brain is making up this story. You don't belong here. I'm like, that story's not gonna work because I'm going on in 5 seconds. I'm like, okay, the best case scenario, attack this guy. Maybe attack him from the stage. Maybe use that as my opening. You maybe say like, John Doe asked what I'm doing here. Well, let me tell y'all, and then I click on the tweet to figure out what his name is, and I accidentally hit the link in his tweet, and it goes to this page that says, what is Brene Brown doing at HubSpot? She's talking about vulnerability, and that's so important. Here's her TED Talk, here are her books. Could you imagine if I would have gone out there and been like a crazy,
dear jerk.
Yeah, totally. No, and that's a true story. It just happened. Because what happens is when something hard happens and we're captured by something difficult, our emotions get the first crack at making sense of something, a bad look, a hard phone call, a disagreement at work. We think that we're rational beings. We think that cognition is going to carry us through and make sense of it, but it doesn't. You know, emotions driving, thought and behavior are not even in the front seat riding shotgun. They're not even in the back seat. Thought and behavior in the trunk going, hey, and emotions driving. So the first thing we do is we tell ourselves a story that reduces ambiguity about what happened. So, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not good enough to be here. Men and women who have the greatest capacity for rising strong, in the moment something happens, they hack into that neurobiological process of making up a story. They stop and say, wait a minute, what's actually going on here? What am I feeling? What do I know for sure? Because what is a story? There's a name in research for a story that has 1 or 2 limited data points, and we fill in the rest with fear.
Wow.
It's called a conspiracy. Yeah, a conspiracy is a story with limited data points. So here's what I know. I know a guy sent a tweet. I know I'm getting ready to talk. That's all I know. So now that I'm ready to ruin his career and use him as a whipping person, as I talk, what is going on? The first step of rising strong is recognize you've been snagged by emotion and get curious about it. That's it. But how many of you were raised in families where you were encouraged to get curious about your emotions and talk about them and explore them? Right? Versus how many of you were raised in families where you were taught, hey, suck it up.
Yep.
Push through and get it done. So the first thing is really reckoning with emotion. What am I feeling? And what do I need to know more about? That is a huge, and so that thing that you say, like,
yeah.
does someone know something that I don't know? Do they have information I don't have? That's a huge part of the reckoning. We just don't do it. So in that minute, in the backstage, when I was on my phone, I could have just said, whoa, Brene, your heart is racing, your teeth are clenched, and you're going in for the kill here. What do you know about this?
Yeah.
Nothing. You know nothing. And what if you knew everything? Who cares? Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
There are 13,000 people. You're going to spend an hour targeting one guy you don't know?
I've been there a lot in my life, especially before my car accident, my teenage years. Then the first woman I ever loved, we had a big breakup, and that breakup sent me down in depression and suicidal planning. And it's tough to dispense advice to people other than get help. And I'll share why. Because that time in my life, I had so many people coming up to me. My friends would come into my dorm room, Brennan, let's go do something. And the hope is lost. And what people, I think, make the mistake of trying to do is hype people up. Everything's gonna be okay, you're gonna be great. And what people need who are suicidal is serious psychological intervention. They need to seek support and help. And outside of that, when they do get that support, the first thing a great therapist is going to do, outside of the emotional reflection work of why are you here and what has caused this sort of pattern for you, they're going to get you starting to get some momentum. The most important thing is when you are super down, outside of finding that emotional reasoning for where you are, is to start getting momentum. Because with momentum comes hope. With momentum comes motivation. With momentum comes, that feeling that there's a reason for tomorrow. And so it's as simple as just saying, okay, what are 3 things I'm gonna do today? And I don't mean that like a lot of personal development guys would say, what are your 3 big goals for the day? Arr! I'm like, dude, sometimes that first goal is, I'm gonna shower today. I'm really gonna shower today. I'm gonna walk to the library. I'm gonna come home. And that's all they got. Literally, that's all they got. And you gotta honor that struggle when you're in that place. Know that where you're at, it is okay that you're there, and now you're gonna need help, and now you're gonna have to set up some daily practices just every day win a little bit. Not like win your dreams, not like crush through goals, not like be badass, not like, no, just momentum, man. You know, most of the guys I've dealt with in that position who were suicidal, outside of their therapeutic work, I said, the most important thing you can do is win the morning. Just win the morning, man. I think that's true for all of us, even high performers. Like if I don't have my morning routine game, I feel, you know, out of sorts. So I think it's true for everybody. You gotta own your morning, you gotta win it, because that starts and sets up everything else. I know you believe that as well. Like people need that discipline, those routines that will help the rest of their day go better. And I don't wanna ever be flippant with the advice to people who are dealing with that situation outside of get some help, get some momentum, and be okay if that momentum is really small, because it will build. Trust that that momentum builds, and trust that those gloomy and bad, dark days, trust that those are going to be there. They'll get less and less and less as you learn how to cope, but they're gonna be there. And so when they're there, it's one of outside of teaching people to bring the joy in my life, I teach people to honor the struggle, honor the difficulty. When we honor the struggle instead of hate the struggle, we can really achieve extraordinary things because our mindset's in the right place. As soon as you honor the struggle, you accept that, oh, of course, there should be struggle here. I should honor this process. When you go to the gym to work out, you honor that this is gonna be hard, and honor that process of getting better. And the more that you bring honor to it, the more your psyche builds with strength, and you get a little bit of that esteem back, because you see yourself engaging something versus avoiding it and running away. You see yourself connecting with something and giving it reverence. You're like I have reverence for the difficulties of life. They may be better. So I don't want a friction-free life. I'm not interested in it. You know, I like to say sometimes that, you know, the journey to greatness begins the moment that our, you know, deep desires for comfort and ease are overpowered by our desires to connect and contribute.
So I'll give you another example outside Frank and Kristen. A friend of mine who just passed recently, he's always been a deep inspiration to me. His name is Art Berg. And Art's a guy that was a young man, good looking, strong, athletic. He lived in Utah. And he fell in love with his absolute sweetheart. She was, you know, the most popular girl, the most attractive girl. She met all the criteria of a college boy. And his buddy and he are driving across the state to go to where he's gonna get married. And he falls asleep in the back seat while his best friend is driving. And his best friend falls asleep in the middle of the night as they're driving. My friend Art Berg woke up rather intensely on the desert floor with the car upside down, his legs trapped beneath it, and unable to feel anything. He became a quadriplegic in an instant. His friend actually was beat up, but actually survived. Now, what do you do in a situation like that? Well, the first thing most people do is they want to curse God, or they want to curse their friend. It's not their fault. Most of what happens in our lives is not our fault, but what we do with it is going to determine the quality of our lives. Sometimes it is our fault, let's be honest. But lots of times, events happen. Stuff happens, or whatever word you want to replace stuff with. You know what I'm talking about. But what's different about this man is he made a different set of decisions. On that day, he said to himself, you know what? I got two choices. I can live here in the dirt and live and suffer the rest of my life for what I've lost, or I can figure out how to maximize what I have. He developed this mindset. His mindset was, before the accident, there were about probably 10,000 things I could do. After the accident, he said I could probably do 9,000 things. Before the accident, I was probably not even doing 500 of those things. I'm gonna do more while I am now. And he did. He became an entrepreneur, started his own bookstore, and became very successful. He married the same childhood sweetheart because this man was so inspirational to be around. It didn't matter what he was in a chair. She loved him. He had 2 children, one of the greatest gifts of life. And he did all kinds of crazy things. He'd scuba dive. His friends would put him in a suit and tie a set of weights to him. He'd drop to the bottom. They'd drag him along the bottom. That was his idea of scuba diving. He was an incredible human being, and he lived an incredibly full life filled with joy. The worst thing ever happened to you, be a quadriplegic. The best thing, win a lottery and feel like everybody wants something from you and you didn't earn it, and there's no sense of joy and everything's about trying to hang on to what you got. What is the best thing that could happen to you? What is the worst? The worst is not to take control of the force that controls your life. And that force is human emotion. I mean, I want you to think about this and answer a question for me if you would. What really changed Frank and Kristen's quality of life? What changed them? You can see the change. You can see it even more a year later, that it's continued to happen. What made the change possible? Did you get it? Did you see it? The answer is simple. We changed the emotional pattern that was controlling their life. And you and I have emotional patterns that are controlling us right now. Whether we're aware of it consciously or not doesn't matter. It's the force that is shaping you. It's shaping your relationship. It's shaping your finances. It's shaping your career. It's shaping the amount of joy or unhappiness or suffering or excitement you have right now in this moment. But it's an invisible force most of us never take a look at. You might want to take a look at it right now through the eyes of what we did with Frank and Kristen.
I was in my comfort zone. I was doing just enough to get by. I was working on a job. They paid me just enough to keep me from quitting, and I worked just hard enough to keep from getting fired. How many know people like that? Blink your eyes if you understand what I'm talking about. I was parked. I knew I could do more. But when my mama died, it took something out of me. When I went through a divorce, it took something out of me. When my best friend died, it took something out of me. I paused. And somebody said that life is like an onion. You have to peel it one layer at a time. And sometimes you cry. Life's going to happen to you when you have a dream. You're going to get slapped around. And don't take it personal. Don't ask, why did this have to happen to me? Why not you? Who would you suggest? You want to give us some names, some email addresses? And don't tell everybody. 80% don't care, and 20% glad it's you. It's called life. Suck it up and move on. Get over it. It happens to everybody. Here's the other thing: as you look at your goals and look at your dreams, when you're going through some stuff, repeat out to me, please. When things go wrong, don't go with them. Yes, write that down. When things go wrong, don't go with them. When you're working on a business deal, you're counting on some money. Someone said you will get the loan, and it falls through. You have an event, and the people that you thought would be there and support you, they don't come through. Or someone turns against you, or you get ripped off. It's going to happen to you. Happened to me. Someone stole all my products. My database, over 180,000 names and addresses. It's not personal. It's going to happen to everybody. It does. 8 out of 10 millionaires have been financially bankrupt. Walt Disney had 7. He filed bankruptcy 7 times and had 2 nervous breakdowns. It's called life. But I got a saying: when life knocks you down, try and land on your back, because if you can look up, you can get up. You've got the power in you to do that. You've got something special. You've got comeback power. Here's the other thing. Let us say together, it's possible. It's necessary. It's me. Yes, write that down. It's me. Take ownership for your life. Nobody can live your dream for you but you. Nobody's going to take care of your business like you. Stop coming up with excuses. Don't give yourself permission to continue to live a small life. You can't fit a big dream into a small life. Give yourself permission to go for it, to test yourself, to challenge yourself, to live full.